Welcome everyone. My name is Ali Tamashiro and I am the marketing manager here at SpotMe and your host for today's webinar, From Execution to Engagement, How to Boost the ROI of B2B Events. Just before we get started, I want to let you know that the presentation is going to be about 30 minutes and we will give 10 minutes for Q&A. And today we have a very special guest speaker, which I will introduce to you. Her name is Laura Ramos. She is the VP and Principal Analyst here at Forrester, and her research specializes on B2B marketers on anything that has to do with technology, customer experience, and demand gen. So welcome, Laura. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Great. And let's get started. How about that?
Sounds great. So welcome everyone, and I want to give a special thanks to Pierre and Ali for asking me to join all of you today. What we're going to talk about is what does it take to go from execution, making sure that your events are done in the most perfect way possible, to real audience engagement. And in doing so, to increase the value that events have for your organizations. Now, as marketers and event managers, we, spend a lot of time, money, and effort on events. In fact, in our most recent survey of marketers, both B2B and B2C, globally, worldwide, Forrester found that on average, no, back up please, that marketers spend about 12% of program budgets on events, and about as high as 18% in some years. And the interesting thing about that spending, however, is that for as many who say that they are planning on increasing their spend on events, there's just as many who say that they plan to cut back. Now, this is unusual because when we ask the same question of other types of marketing tactics, particularly the digital ones, we see the desire to spend more could be 3 to 4 times as high. But here's the thing, we've been looking at this data for years and it never seems to change. Events are always the #1 thing that marketers spend marketing budget on. And despite how they say whether they will spend more or less, they're always doing events the following year. So, like I said, events are here to stay. The problem is your attendees and their buyer experiences and expectations are changing. Next slide, please. As you can see here, there is the potential for there to be an entirely different kind of experience that people could get from events. Now, I know for many of you, this is very futuristic, having your whole audience wearing VR headgear, but this may be something that is not too far in the future for certain ones of us. And my question is, next click, is what will be the future of audience engagement? How will you be able to actually engage and satisfy the expectations of an audience that is looking to engage in entirely different ways? So, next slide. And Forrester has been seeing this change in buyer expectations happening for a while yet. In fact, we refer to it as the consumerization of the business-to-business buyer. And basically, because of different changes, a combination of learned and native digital consumer behaviors, these things are having a dramatic impact on every phase of the business-to-business buying cycle. And your view as marketers and event managers of the phases that customers pass through on their course to becoming, of creating a relationship with your company. The traditional view of the B2B buyer is merging with the B2C consumer expectations that they are doing, resulting in this new type of buyer where characteristics like being interdependent on other people at their company and going through highly considered, 3 to 6 to 9 month buying cycles are still the same. But many of the elements of being anonymous, waiting until much longer before they contact you, being attracted to the emotional characteristics of empathy and of you really understanding their problems and showing that, and of having the ability to change. These are the kinds of buying expectations and experiences that we're seeing happening in the market now. Next slide. And just to show that, here is some research from our buy-side, B2B buy-side online survey that we do with a lot of business-to-business decision makers. And when it comes to, how they prefer to engage online, first of all, 2/3 of them say that they prefer to do all of their research online on their own. And this is from our 2018 study, which that number is up from the 53% that we saw in 2005. So this number is increasing. And more importantly, it shows that the consequence, I guess I should say, of this is that they are spending more time online and less time talking to you and your sellers. Next slide, please. They also find gathering information on their own superior to interacting with this salesperson. So you can see that the story continues to get worse and worse when it comes to how are you really going to engage them. They'd much rather, again, be on their own and put off talking to you for as long as possible. And then finally, the next slide. A whopping 70% say that they find it is just way more convenient for them to purchase off a website than talk to a salesperson. And that, won't be the case for every company, but this is definitely a trend that we see in our B2B and our e-commerce research, that regardless of whether, you're selling consumer products or you're selling products that other businesses consume, the desire to be able to conduct most of the transaction online is increasing. Now, this means for sure that your sellers are going to be come into the discussion very late in the process, and for some kinds of go-to-market motions are simply going to be order takers. And this means there needs to be, however, something that is in front of these buyers as they're online and making their decisions. And I think a lot of marketers recognize this. Next slide. Because what we have seen in this digital age of the customer is that while these consumers are out looking, we are actively putting a lot of different types of content in front of them. The problem is that we're doing it, our competitors are doing it. There's so many places that are trying to hit them from so many channels with different kinds of messages and capability that the buyers are just getting frustrated at this point. And they're putting up barriers to avoid your overtures, avoid your content as much as they possibly can. Next slide. Except when it comes to events. Now, this is interesting, because this is a different study that we do. And here we go out and talk to technology decision makers in multiple countries. And they're larger companies, right? We have the cutoff being, you have to have at least 500 employees to participate in this. And on this, we're seeing that we ask them, well, what are the places, that you rely on when you are making and exploring a technology decision? And interestingly enough, the things that they're using to help them, a lot of a big proportion come from the types of events, the things that they would get from events. So content developed by industry experts and analysts has traditionally been the number one thing in or the number one response when we've done this survey over the past 4 years. But in our latest survey, we asked about event information, and we were surprised, but then I guess at the result, but then when we started thinking about it, we're going, no, events are really a place where people are showing a very strong inclination to want to learn about something because they're having a problem with something. It's not just events as places themselves, but on the next slide, you can also see that the materials that people interact with at the events, whether it's the presentations given at the events or the materials that they can get from in-person seat drops, at the back of the room, in vendor booths, wherever it happens to be. These fall among the top 10 most engaging types of content formats that decision makers are using to then later on inform their decision making and their selection process for what it is that they want to buy. And so what we're finding on the next slide is that, that the nature of the interaction with events is also changing. So not only are events important and that they are a clear buying intention signal that you should factor in for all of your attendees who are there, is that they're just no longer content to sit and listen like we saw in the very first slide of this presentation. They want to be a part of the action. And they are expecting not just to be talked at, but to have dialogue, to have an experience. And those experiences can happen in a lot of different ways, and we're going to share some of those with you. But ultimately, on the next slide, if you are a top marketer or event manager, you are doing this. You are delivering event experiences that your customers value. And we believe that this is something that all marketers should be shooting for in order to make that budget money really turn the best investment back to your company. And that's because, and these experiences matter a lot, because what we have found at Forrester through our Age of the Customer research on the next slide is that exceptional experiences are now the best, and for many of you, the only way to create competitive advantage. If you look at what all of the different mechanisms are for engaging with customers, for interacting with customers, for creating competitive differentiation in the marketplace, you'll see that your competitors can meet you word for word, goal for goal, result for result on things like, what is your supply chain? How does it act? How does it act? What are your sales processes like? How do you manufacture things if you do? How do you deliver services? Technology has become the great intermediator that makes it so that it's very difficult for companies to differentiate on products and services alone. And the place where you can actually create a differentiation is with your customer experiences. And event experiences factor very high into that. Next slide, please. So the way to get to that superior experience at events is to make sure that not only are they immersive, right, that they are engaging your attendees in multiple different ways, but the things that they get to engage with are memorable and that they're going to stick with them and they will refer back to them after the event is long over. And there's some very key principles that this is built on the next slide. And we think that digital is one of the things that can really help you make your events more immersive. So in looking at why do people keep spending on events even when they say that they won't? And why are events still the number one thing that everybody manages to fit into their budget? And events still really matter. And the reason that they matter is because they create those face-to-face experiences that really matter both to the attendees and to people from your company, your partners, just the whole hosting of the people that would be sponsors and exhibitors at your events too. Getting the opportunity to meet somebody in person and dialogue with them is one of the key things. And we find that digital really helps to help attendees connect with each other. It gives you different ways of not only approaching them, but helping them connect with each other. The other reasons that events matter is that people prefer to have interactions. They don't want to just be, sit there and listen to what you have to say. They want to have a dialogue. And digital is turning out to be a way to get them and keep your audience involved, not just during the talks, but at every stage of the event. And when they feel that the event has been customized to their personal needs, it really leaves an impression. And this is easy to do for the simple fact that you're having conversations. You're not just giving them something to look at. And so that personalization factor in events in general is very high. But we feel through digital, you can make that even higher because they're digital tools and capabilities that can really customize not only their experience, but the content that they're receiving at the event, and really ask them to, engage in the dialogue that you're hoping that they will have. And then finally, while people are at events, they also want to share their advice and expertise. That's why networking is one of the number one reasons people give for attending events. And so capturing customer supplied advice, experience, and expertise any way that you can while they're at the event is one of the ways to not only keep them engaged, but to return the investment that you're getting, to multiply the investment that you're getting on events. So on the next page, you'll see that as you add digital capabilities to your events, you'll see that the digital is really going to help you improve your ability to show ROI. Not only because the engagement that you're going to have with your attendees increases, because you're going to be able to gather new data and new insights. So without that data, you won't be able to get to insights. And if you can't measure those insights and measure the data, like what happened at the start of their journey through the event and what happened afterwards, you can't measure value. But when you can, anything that you can measure at all, and again, you can only get that through data, you can assign value to it. And when you assign value to it, that's what's going to help you to calculate the return on investment. So let me take you through the 4 ways that digital helps events one at a time at this point. And on the next slide, we're going to start with how you use digital to gather participant data and insights and engage and enhance the relationships that people have when they participate in events, when they attend events, when they network at events. And a lot of this happens on the next slide through the event application. In fact, this is probably where the state of the art is today in terms of, do you have, as a host of the event, an event application? Now, some of you are saying, well, I'm attending events or I'm sponsoring them and I'm not in control of the event application. And one of the things that we're seeing changing in all of this is really being able to draw the exhibitors in and making sure that, the content that's being presented, not only on the main stage, but in the different areas, and making sure that people can get to the right place at the right time and that they're getting a customized agenda. All of this is being made available to partners and exhibitors at the events as well. But on sort of the basic level, there's social capability, there's the ability to understand what's going on and customize it to your needs. There's just really practical information that attendees need to be able to refer to. And of course, there's the ability to decide what content and how to download things and look at the abstracts and all of these. These are the kinds of things. So that the mobile app is now really a way of enhancing sort of the day of experience. And for those of you that are using the mobile application, really capture information about the attendees and share it. And share information with attendees so that their engagement heightens and they feel like that they're having a dialogue with you, not just being there to be part of the event. An example of this comes from, on the next slide, Autodesk. And I think what we really like about the Autodesk example is that, Autodesk has been able to connect with over 45,000 different attendees at their Autodesk University events that they hold on an annual basis worldwide. And one of the things that they make a really concerted effort at doing is matching people who attend events with other people like them or with Autodesk speakers and experts and people who are there. Now, understand what Autodesk does in the area of computer-aided design and graphics is that they're serving a lot of different audiences. You've got engineers in this audience. You've got people who work in the construction industry. You've got architects and designers. You've got people who are building products. You've got people who are running the equipment that build certain products. And all of them rely on Autodesk technology to help them do that. But their needs are very different. And if Autodesk tried to meet all of those specific needs on their own. They would need, 45 times more staff. Instead, they rely on their audience members to connect with each other and share best practices. So not only do you learn a lot about what's happening at Autodesk and what some of the best practices are from Autodesk on the main stage, but your ability to connect with other people like you is greatly enhanced through this. Okay, the next thing that we're going to look at on the next slide is how do you use digital to get and keep your audience involved? Because again, it's not so much that the audience just wants to sit there. Every one of these attendees now brings a computer or a laptop or a smartphone to the event with them. And to keep them engaged with you and not multitasking and doing something else requires you to have different ways of using, again, we think digital to help get them involved. And on the next slide, we're going to see some examples here. And I'm showing examples of what the SpotMe application looks like and some things that Forrester is doing on our application. And these are meant to be examples. These are not meant to be like, oh, this is what you should be using. I'm just saying, the mobile app has really become part of anybody's event experience. And so here are some of the things that you should specifically be looking at beyond the basics to create more engaging opportunities. So the number one thing is really give your attendees many different ways to participate. And on the Forrester side of things, one of the things that we do is we have a very active feed. There's a lot that goes on in the feed. And we also, it's not only like Forrester analysts and Forrester people commenting, it's a lot of the show attendees are talking about their experiences and capturing things that they're seeing on stage, like at our digital transformation and innovation event. But they also have the ability to connect with the analyst, directly through the attendee app. One of the things that we don't use a lot, but I know is available, and so SpotMe gave us an example to share here, is just a lot of the different elements that really help to give them something to do, from things like giving you feedback on certain things, to taking notes, to bookmarking events, to participating in a group feed, to answering or submitting questions for a Q&A session. And in these applications, one of the things that really helps to drive engagement is by gamifying some of these. And so you can see that if you do these different things, you earn different points, and those different points can be used to, increase your advocacy score, to give you rewards that you can cash in on later, whatever the case may be. We think that this, that one of the key things about this too is to really get that audience interconnection going. So one of the things on the next slide that we see a lot of people starting to use is to leverage digital and people's smartphones to bring them literally into the conversation. So this is from our customer experience conference from last year. And we have Harley Manning on stage with one of our clients, and and the audience is literally asking questions that they want to have Harley discuss with our panelist. And the audience is voting on which particular questions they'd really like Harley to ask her first and discuss. And so he's got a monitor off stage that he's looking at that lets him see what those questions look like, and in real time goes through the list of questions. Now, we also take these questions and through the app answer them during the show or post-show. So for those who didn't get their questions answered on stage, we follow up with them as well. Now, the third area that we're going to look at in the next stage has to do with what does it take to increase the event impact through custom and personalized experiences. And when you have events, and the thing about digital is it really helps to personalize the experience for every single person that attends. And one of the companies that's doing this really well on the next slide is IBM. We find that customer-obsessed marketers are using these digital tools and experiences to assist their attendees and to meet their specific goals. And one of the things that the tools are doing, of course, is collecting data. so that they can not only understand exactly what it is that the attendees tell them, but also uncover and maybe stimulate some of the hidden interest that attendees may have. Now, IBM does this using their Watson technology, their artificial intelligence technology called Watson, to make personalized content recommendations to show attendees. They leverage the event data that they've collected before and during the event to evaluate whether, attendees are getting a match between their preferences and the expectations that they had coming in. And if not, to make sure that those attendees are getting a better experience by suggesting track sessions that they should go to, people that they should connect with, or other types of activity, maybe even attend an exhibitor's booth that they should be participating in. They're using Watson to learn what sessions actually mattered and how to direct people to them. So much so that Colleen Biscani, who's their head of global conferences there, says, at IBM, we do, 6,000 events a year. We used to do an event for 30,000 people when, you're thinking about things like Connect. She says, now we can do 30,000 experiences in the context of one single event. And I think that's pretty impressive. On the next slide, we're seeing an example too, how that mobile and AI come together to really personalize the experience. And so this is what SAP's experience looks like. And so you're getting recommendations. It's not just here are all the events, you pick through them. It's actually recommending which different events that you should go to based on the kinds of things that you've been doing and the kinds of interests that you've expressed. But SAP takes it one step further and gives you a little online digital personal assistant. He says, and you can ask questions and the digital assistant will help to recommend content or connect you with someone who can help you to answer your question better. And then finally, the last thing that we're going to look at together on the next slide is how do you use digital to capture those customer supplied assets? And digital can really do this well because we believe that, yes, you can look at things like how many leads and how many opportunities did we get from the people who attended the event. But you've got to remember that events are experiential. And people are going to be having a great time at your event if it's done well. And they're going to want to share their experiences with others and be seen as an expert or very knowledgeable on particular facts. So why not give them the opportunity to do that? And video capture and live streaming is really a wonderful way of doing that. So here's an example on the next slide from HIMSS, which is the premier health industry event. Tens of thousands of people attend this event. And live streaming is one of those kinds of things that extend your event to those who can't be there in person due to budget or travel constraints. And HIMSS knows this, and so they reach 40,000 attendees because they're giving those remote attendees an opportunity to experience key speakers and events, not only from live streaming what's happening on stage, but getting them into this, like newsroom, news booth afterwards. And, either in real time or on demand, capture all this information that can be delivered in real time or on demand so that their ideas and the things that they're sharing can be made available to a much broader audience. So by using a software that takes the streaming and then either streams it directly or captures it for on demand, John Whelan, the executive vice president at HIMSS media team, said that they've been able to extend the event from 45,000 physical attendees to over 100,000 unique viewers globally during the course of HIMSS, which is, an extraordinarily impressive number. And then on the next example, here are some things. Now, so one of the other things that really extends the return on investment of events is making sure that the event is not just about the event, but that the experience goes on and on afterwards. And two key things that we're finding people doing is, number one, building a community. At Forrester, we have Forrester leadership boards, and all of our Forrester leadership boards attend or have a simultaneous event at our events that we host. But because we have a community a website, so to speak, we're not only talking about the event, but we're recording many of the events that happen, not only at our big physical events, but on the webinars and on the community events that happen for each of the different Forrester leadership boards, and giving our leadership board attendees the ability to interact with each other on these communities. So like taking the Q&A, for example, we always make sure that the Q&A and answers ends up back on our appropriate communities. It's also great to bring users back to the app so that they're in the app more than just at the day of the days of the event. And here's an example from SpotMe showing how they create what they call a digest, a daily digest. One of their clients creates a daily digest. And then there's an event summary, and you can set notifications. So if people add content about the event, maybe a new presentation that hadn't been there right during the event or after the event finally got added, these notifications can let the attendees know, hey, that content that you were waiting for is there now, and bring them back to the event app to gather it. Okay, so that's how we think digital can really help you to enhance your events. On the next slide, I want to talk to you a little bit about the technology that automates this digital. And technology's role here is to really automate the routine and to scale that very deep dialogue experience across all of the attendees. You can see how companies are doing this with 30 and 45,000 attendees. So certainly you could do this with your conferences and events as well. But do it in a way so that your marketers can really focus more on understanding the experience and gathering the data so that you can improve your events and demonstrate the ROI back to your company. Now, we think that one of the key technology areas or categories for doing this on the next slide is called the event management solution, and we call them EMS. This is a category of technologies that help event managers, and we think increasingly more marketers who are responsible for the products and services and audiences that they're trying to reach, manage, automate, and scale both the digital and in-person experiences that happen at events, so that ultimately you're providing the most engaging attendee experience while increasing the return on investment of these events back to yourselves and to your partners who are sponsoring it. So the EMS category is something on the next slide that Forrester has been writing about. In fact, recently we published what we now call a NowTech, which is our name for a market overview. And I would say that our findings from this is that we're looking at a very fragmented market right now. And there's some different players in it. They're doing very different things in some aspects. And so our NowTech wasn't really, comparing, as they say, apples to apples, but more like apples to bananas to peaches. So the NowTech talks about what are the key capabilities, and then are there different categories within this core category, subcategories, if you will, of vendors who are providing capability. One of the things that we're seeing happening, and honestly, as analysts, we hope happens, because not everything that's being delivered in EMS solutions today is going to survive long term. So consolidation is happening, and because of that, you need to think about how you're making your investments very carefully. Even though there's sort of this comprehensive event orchestration category, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should be shooting for that as the goal of your EMS solution. You're going to have to prioritize what it takes for your particular needs. For example, a lot of these comprehensive event orchestration suites are often prioritizing streamlining the processes that event managers need to do to make your life simpler as you're planning, executing, and hosting the event. But they're doing that over creating exceptional experiences for the attendees. So you may need to invest in areas that are going to create those exceptional experiences. Some of those large comprehensive event orchestration solutions are also being built through acquisitions. And their focus right now is integrating all of those pieces together, which means they're spending more time and effort doing the acquisition, doing the integration of the acquired technology, rather than thinking about how to integrate with other best of breed solutions or the key MarTech components of your stack. So think about all of those things as you make the decision, and don't just run to sort of the most comprehensive, biggest thing on the marketplace. The other thing that you should think about very carefully on the next slide is that as this consolidation happens, you're going to need to really think about how this requires you to integrate in with your systems of record. So this is something that Forrester's been talking about for a number of years, where we distinguish between those systems of record that host all the processes, and on the right you can see some examples of those, from the systems of engagement that touch people. And in the case of events, this is, you know, your attendees, it's your partners. It could also be your employees who are there, and it could be a number of devices like their smartphones that are engaging with you and your content at the events as well. Systems of record, very simply, are those operational backbones that in our case, the marketing and selling organizations use to capture information about buyers, to manage the selling process and pipeline, and to understand where they should be tuning their budget dollars to make the investment deliver the highest return. An event management system is a system of engagement. It is the kind of thing that you would use on top of the system of record to make sure that for events, you're capturing the right kinds of information, you're capturing a broad spectrum of information, but being able to integrate that into the system of record that is your customer CRM, sorry, took me a while to get that one out, or marketing automation system platform. Here's the key thing. Because of the consolidation happening, you need to make sure that you're integrating into a system of record, not some intermediary that could be, you know, taken out of the picture due to a consolidation activity. Do this in order to deliver the most meaningful customer experience, because that's also going to help you attach the data. Now, this type of integration isn't always easy, but if you've got a good company that you're working with, an organization who, you know, has thought through, hey, how do we connect to the systems that you're already using? That's what's going to help you deliver that more meaningful customer experience and make sure that your experiences are more engaging. So just to summarize here a little bit before I ask Pierre to join us and talk about specifically how is SpotMe helping marketers and event managers do many of the things that I've been talking about. I want to just summarize briefly on the next slide and kind of conclude my portion of the presentation. So the first point I want to make is that now's the time to really sharpen your strategy around events and move from thinking about just the event to really focusing on what is the customer's experience and how can we engage them in a more rich manner while they're at our events. To do that, you need to, on the second point, think about ongoing campaign as an event as part of an ongoing campaign that stretches across the entire year, not just some point in time that like happens in the month of September. And you need to think about this when you're committing to certain events, designing them and executing them. This isn't something that you're just going to say, oh my gosh, we're in the healthcare industry, we need to go to HIMSS. When is HIMSS? We have to be there. But really think about, who else do we know that we think is going to be at HIMSS? How can we create an experience for them that takes them to the next level? Who do we need to have there, not only as our customers, but as partners that can make that HIMSS experience more engaging for them? Then you need to invest in ways to collect and share attendee experience data at the events while they're experiencing it. Now, if you're just sponsoring an event, a lot of that is going to happen during the event. But also think about it as ways of making sure that you can connect with your existing customers who are going to be there, or prospects that you're in discussions with, so that while you're both at the event together, there's an opportunity to collect and share information about what they're experiencing, what they would like to do differently, and what are some of the problems that they're trying to solve. while your customers are there too, engage with them and find ways through even handheld video is a marvelous way on the next bullet to use events to increase your marketing asset catalog. If it's your event, take advantage at every turn of capturing your customers, singing your praises and talking about why they like working with you, using digital and video ways of doing that. As you do this, you will involve your audience to delight your audience. And that's our next bullet point. Is if you're going to keep them involved and get them to come back year after year, you're going to have to delight them. And creating those dialogues, those engaging experiences, we believe is the way that you're going to get there. And then finally, to manage all of this, you're going to need technology. But that technology shouldn't focus just on the event. You're going to need to pick solutions that can channel the artifacts of those experiences and engagement points into your systems of records so that you really learn what was the total sum of the experience that our attendees had at this event, and what does that tell us about where they are in the buying cycle, and how do we then use that information to engage and nurture them further and to bring them along in their purchase decision making. I hope you found this useful. And Pierre, I'd like to turn this over. Oh, we're going to do some questions now? Yeah, sure. We can do some questions now.
Thank you so much, Laura. This is really great. I am going to bring Pierre in, our CEO, so you both can address some of the questions that have come in through your presentation. Pierre, are you there?
Yes. Hi, Ali, and thank you, Laura. Thank you for hosting this webinar with us.
You're welcome.
So I'll get started. Laura, this question is more directed to you. When we talk about, the digital and physical experiences, how have you seen marketers successfully combine both the digital and physical experiences at events?
Ali, this is a great question. I think like a lot of the examples that I gave in this presentation can give people a sense of what it takes, whether they're using streaming video, for example, or the mobile apps, or, interactive kinds of experiences on interactive media, interactive boards, or virtual reality, or working with robots. My point is, though, you don't have to use all of those kinds of things to make it engaging. What you need to really look at is what has been the sort of standard level of engagement that our attendees have had at our previous events. And what are some of the things that we need to do to bring it to the next level of engagement? And I think, just for example, if you don't have a digital app for events, get one. If you're not doing the sort of Q&A and you do a lot of speakers and panel discussions and you want to get questions from the audience, but also make the audience participate in prioritizing what they'd like to hear from those speakers, use the kind of Q&A capability that we demonstrated at the Forrester event in one of the examples. But I think there's a lot of examples in here that show just how easy it is to tie the digital aspects in with the physical event itself.
Great, thank you so much. We were talking a lot about what, immersive experiences making a very good event experience. That's kind of a loose term. How do you define a good event experience? Pierre, I'll ask you this first, and then Laura, maybe I can get your answer on that next.
Sure.
Right. So I think there is a way to think about it a little bit like you think about psychology. And if you heard of the Maslow pyramid, and you have at the bottom of it, you have this sort of basic needs that perhaps you have as in life, but also that you have for events, and these are what we call shelter and food. So this is how it used to be, to define a good event, right? A good venue, good service. This is what people were sort of looking first. But what we see now, and this is what has been changing now, people want more. And I guess just like, as people evolve in life and they fulfill their basic needs, they want to attain, higher level type of needs. And here we're talking about things like love, like, esteem, and perhaps even self-actualization. And this is where we're looking at other types of experiences. And this is when people want to do things that are mobile and social. I think Laura talked about personalization. This is when people want to get, new knowledge, like they want to learn, they want a learning experience, they want to get something new, they want to touch recommendations. They want, and probably that's the most important here, they want to build connections. If you think about it, 70% of people going to events will tell you that they're going there to connect with other people or with speakers. This is a major driving force. And thinking even further, contributing to the company they belong to, or company contributing to the brand that they like. These are things that define a good event experience.
Yeah, Pierre, I would agree with all of that. I think, in thinking about immersive, the things that I would point to is, are you, as the, sponsor of the event, or as the marketing person involved in the event, showing that the attendees are having a more immersive experience on a gradually increasing basis as you either go through the year of all of your events, or even from day 1 to day 3 if you have a multi-day event. And I would be looking at things like, how are you tracking and understanding that they're connecting with other people, networking? Like, what does the app tell you about who's networking with whom? How are you engaging in dialogue through things like feedback, through the Q&A capability, through social feeds that go on that people can interact with on their phones? Look at the ways that people get to share their advice and their experience, like formally through the presentations, of course, but also in those sort of video capture moments or podcasting events that go on during the course of the event. And I totally agree with the personalization, looking at how much people take advantage of recommendations, personalize their agendas. All of these are clues that the immersive quality of your event is increasing over time. I don't think there's any one baseline number that, like, ooh, everybody should get to this number. I think you need to show that it's increasing in order to show that it's having an impact.
Great, thank you so much. And kind of following up to what you said, and also on this slide about building a community and using content after the event, what are some recommendations you make to help continue those discussions, to help continue engage participants once the event is over?
Oh, well, so one of the things that I think is very important here is to have a tight integration with your marketing automation platform. And what I'm seeing certain people, top marketers be able to do is to collect that data. Like, what did people, what sessions did they go to? What things did they say they were interested in? What did they comment on? What they feedback? And using analytic technology, boil that down, and then also connect the people who were from the same company back to their accounts, so that you get sort of an overall account profile of what was the impact, what happened at this event. And then based on where you see sort of the strongest signals of engagement and interest and all of that sort of thing, they drop the attendees who went to the event into different nurturing streams. And so then after the event happens, they're not, the first kind of thing that they say is, hey, thank you for coming to the event, and here's your event summary, and here's some things that you learned, and here's where you can go to get the content. And and not just try to drop all that on them at once, but use the marketing automation platform to stream that out to them over a period of time, and see if there's anything in particular that they interact with again as another way of increasing their engagement score and understanding whether or not the salesperson should maybe try to have an appointment or conversation on the phone with them directly to see what's going on there. Or to introduce them to new people inside the account who maybe attended but never attended before, and what are some of the things that they care about. But it's through using that nurturing stream that happens after the event, it reinforces for a much longer period of time the value that the attendee got from the event, and encourages them to continue to interact with some of the content and put that content to use making decisions.
Great. And leading on to that, I'm going to turn it over to Pierre, kind of touching on what Laura just answered right now, collecting the data, looking at analytics, and bringing it back to your marketing channels. What is what kind of ROI are you seeing with our customers, and how are they measuring it?
Yeah, there are two ways to look at this. But for one, you could really think of an event app as as part of the marketing stack. And the first thing people think of the marketing stack is newsletters and email automation. So it, every marketer nowadays knows, what's the open rate for a newsletter? What's the click rate? What's the bounce rate? And you can even go, on websites and, they will tell you for this industry, for finance, it has to be 21% open rate. And click rate has to be, 2.5%. And these things have been measured. And if you look at, what happens for events, this is still yet very obscure. People are still even debating what's the definition of app adoption. But these metrics, exist, and I think they're now on the way of being consolidated. So app adoption, average number of daily visits, time spent in the app, all these things are being standardized. And actually, one of our goals is to build benchmarks for these metrics, and building from the data or inferring from the data that several millions of users that we have every year, and from the thousands of apps that people have built, we can get to those numbers at a pretty good level of accuracy. Now, the second thing you can look from an ROI standpoint, especially in the B2B buying space, is intent data. And this is exactly what Laura just described. What you're learning from your customer. So if you have, a customer visiting a specific product page on your app, is then fed onto your customer relationship management system, and then is used to accelerate your sales pipeline or your marketing engagement plan. So one example we heard from a major pharma company that has been integrating mobile apps into their marketing stack is that they made the strategic decision to actually engage less healthcare professionals, but spend more money per healthcare professional that they are engaging with. And the challenge is, of course, to select the one that they want to engage with and select the one they want to invite to these events. And they're using past event data to make those decisions based on what they call an engagement score, which is defined on, what's the participation, how many questions they ask, how much time they engage with, how much time they've tried to learn things from the app, how often they respond to surveys, and all types of engagement data that we gather from the app. And this is how they drive it. They drive business decisions to focus their engagement on the most interesting prospect for them.
Great, thank you so much. Laura, back to you. Someone asked a question regarding the HIMSS example with the live streaming.
Mm-hmm.
How could this event planner ensure that live streaming doesn't start becoming a cost-cutting effort for companies attending these larger conferences? The more and more who live stream, the more we meeting planners have to tailor these events around the platform, which could affect the revenue stream we see from travel, roaming, and attendee engagement on site.
So my response to this question is, maybe you need to think a little bit more about the customer's experience and less about the revenue that you get from the event. And I know that's might be kind of anathema to think about as an event manager, but as a person in your company who wants to create this differentiated customer experience, and remember, that's probably for many of you the only way to create differentiation in the marketplace. You need to think about this from the customer's perspective. And you may have customers who are valuable or attendees that aren't customers that you want to be, customers, and they just simply can't get on the plane to attend the event. And sometimes it's a matter of money, and sometimes it's just a matter of time and attention, which I think is becoming the more valuable commodity. And so why not give them the opportunity to participate in a deeper, richer way through things like live streaming and being able to participate in that way. I think you could be creative too, in that you don't need to sacrifice what do we call it, the registration revenue. Like, you know, you have to pay to go to the event. Live streaming shouldn't just be free for everyone, although some people take that philosophy because they don't live stream every aspect of the event. But there should be some element that, you know, you pay to play when it comes to the live or the on-demand consumption of the content that comes out of there. But I think if you really wanted a differentiated customer experience, you would look at ways of demonstrating the reach of the audience and the engagement of the audience on the live streaming, and how that is having a better impact on the overall ROI of the event than thinking about what's the impact to the events team, you know, and what better engaged customers have in terms of your overall company's value, rather than what's happening to the events team when certain people choose not to come, and you don't collect the hotel and you know, full-time registration and all of those kinds of fees that go along with that.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so we're running out of time, so we just have one last question to close this for both you, Laura, and Pierre. Everybody wants to be innovative, and everyone's thinking about the future. What capabilities do you see as driving the future of events? Pierre?
Yes, so the way we like to think about it is that it revolves around three different things. The first one is what we call reach. And this is about how we can go and talk to more people. The second is the engagement, which everyone keeps talking about. And this is more about creating more meaningful conversation with the people that you already have. And the last part, which is sort of the new kid in the block, is automation. And this is all about reducing the complexity, but also reducing what we call the data waste, where we have all those data points that end up nowhere. So this is where we see innovation happening. Now, the latest tech, and if you think about augmented reality and virtual reality and this kind of things, will always be used to attract more people. So essentially to increase your reach. But then as you need to drive dialogue and connections, this is where you'll be needing some sort of guardrails and useful functionality, which these days is supported by AI recommendations or chatbots and the likes. But the interesting things which we are hearing more and more about are actually topics that used to be more CIO type of audiences. And if you've ever heard of cloud data integration platforms, this is sort of the new thing. And this platform, if you heard of a platform called Zapier, for example, and what these things let you do is that it lets people that we call citizen developers, who without having to code can create fully integrated apps and platforms. And so to give you a little example, we had one client who actually came up with the idea of using a Dropbox folder to insert document into his event app. And all of that by having 3 clicks and Zapier connecting Dropbox with our app. We have other clients who had the idea of connecting a financial newsfeed to send push notification into their forum apps. Again, without any coding, all on their own. And I think we're going to see more and more of these things to happen.
Yeah, I think that the technology innovation will always be there. I think where the concentration of the effort, I completely agree with Pierre, is on reach. When I think about that word, I think about scale, and how you use technology to touch a bigger audience, and to bring some of the event experience and content to audiences who don't even attend the event, but be able to use that in ways to create awareness and relationship so that people, understand more about your brand and your company story and what it is that you have to offer. And cloud and AI like coming together to make that engagement and automation experience richer. I think one of the capabilities, in terms of where the technology is going is that I just would like to see the technology get used more. I mean, one of the disappointments that we found in doing the Now Tech was that there doesn't appear to be a big thriving market here. There are a few players that are in sort of the big category, but for business to business technologies for event marketing solutions, there were an awful lot that were at the low end of the scale in terms of the size of the companies and the type of, which is a proxy for the type of success that they're having. And it seems like even though events are the number one thing that marketers are spending program budget on, they spend it on the logistics of the event, like having the hotel and getting people there and all of that kind of stuff, and not on technology that makes these events more immersive and engaging. And so making that investment in the technology to help you do that, I think is where one of the biggest trends that I'm hoping this industry will take forward.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Laura. We really appreciate your time and having you join us. And for everybody who attended, thank you so much for attending. I will be sending the webinar slides as long as in the recording. And if you have other questions, feel free to contact me. Thank you.